Titan of Mediation, an interview with Dr. Habib Chamoun-Nicholas, part of the series Manousso Musing, with seasoned mediator trainer Dr. Barbara Manousso. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcast. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Ołowska-Czajka, based in Warsaw, Poland, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator.
And I'm Dr. Barbara Manousso, and I'm based in Houston, Texas, and also in Newport, Rhode Island. And today I am just absolutely delighted. We're going to have the first of a three-part series with Dr. Chamoun. And he has been an author and has written 8 books to date. And we're going to make this a series of his last 3 books that are absolutely critical and very, very important to the mediation process and for negotiation. But the focus of our series, of course, is on mediation. And Dr. Chamoun, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Dr. Chamoun, I wanted to talk today about your deal guidelines for flawless negotiation. That was really, it's an absolutely outstanding book that's required for all our mediation students. And you have excellent background. You've worked in corporate America. You've been a professor for many years, and of course, an author and a key negotiator yourself. So you've brought a wealth of information to the field of mediation. So could you tell us a little bit about what brought you to why this book was different from anything that had been on the market, and what makes this what's your wealth of information that you're bringing to this book?
Yes, of course. Well, actually, I always wonder from very young age, how can you make a methodological approach to things, right? Either it is a business development or it is a sales or negotiation or conflict management. How do you go about it methodologically? So I wonder, and I say, why don't we come up with a method, that goes from zero to the deal, And so that's when I thought about the deal methodology, DEAL, where you think about what is the driving force of each other to get to an agreement or not to get to an agreement. Then what could be the entrapments? What are the things that stop you from getting to the agreement? The block that you have to go through, the barriers, the objections, internal, externals. And then I said, as Plato said, for the whole to be well, the parts need to be well. So in negotiation, for the whole to be well, the parts have to be well. That's where it comes the A of analysis, which is the 6 P's of negotiation: person, process, prognosis, problem, product, etc. Right? So, and then after that, it came the L as leverage. Even if everything is given, there is something that makes the difference between A and B, and that is experience, track record, leverage. And so that's how the methodology came. But I always wonder, how are the Mexicans, because I'm originally from Mexico, how are the Mexicans about negotiation? Do they negotiate or not? Are they good or not? So, and then I went to Harvard and to Tufts University with Dr. Salacus, and I utilized the research that he's doing for different cultures and try to understand Mexicans versus, and that was one of the first works that about Mexico negotiating, how do the Mexicans negotiate? And so I did that research, and we published that book, because of that. So in a way, not only having a methodology, but also understanding cross-cultural. How do you negotiate with different cultures? That was the next step, right? Later on, but at this point, I concentrate on Mexico, where I knew. I knew from the 32 states, and I knew the youth, the old, and then try to understand the different segments of there. And, it's interesting because my mom, rest in peace, she used to teach me how to negotiate. And then I went to Harvard to understand how to negotiate, but I really learned from my mom. And I always tell my students, you need to listen to your moms, because my mom used to tell me, yeah, you will be a great negotiator and you will be a great professor. And I couldn't believe it. I never understood it because my PhD is in engineering anyway, So, but anyway, that's the methodology comes from the engineering part, because that was my dream, to teach engineers, which are really in a square, how to negotiate, how to sell. That was my initial idea.
And to those of you who are just listening rather than viewing, we of course encourage you to go to the YouTube channel Lawyers and Mediators International and watch that, or to the Instant Mediations website where you can find it, or Instant Mediations app. However, what we see on the screen is the deal, as has been explained by Dr. Chamoun, as the main title, and together with a beautiful picture of Dr. Chamoun smiling. Because if you make a deal, I understand this is a good reason to smile. Before we started the recording, Dr. Chamoun already revealed that he doesn't like talking about himself too much, but I think it's necessary to understand the depth of understanding and negotiations. You just mentioned your mom, but you also
Yeah.
said that even though originally you are from Mexico, you also have
Yes.
Lebanese roots. And your first book was published in Mexico in Spanish, and it was of great success, and it was about business at this point. Please tell us how these multicultural levels of understanding of culture, of communication in different languages influenced you into going into writing books and into being interested so much in communication.
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, yes, I am a cross-cultural myself. My parents from Lebanon, and I was born in Mexico. And I remember when they used to tell me, and I used to come home and say, "Dad, they tell me I'm different." And he used to tell me, "I'm so glad they tell you you're different. Thank God you're different." So I was born with that as a blessing rather than something else, right? So that always helped me to go through everything. And because everywhere I went, I was different anyway. And now in today's environment, everybody's different, right? And they are praising the differences. So, which is great, but I went through that. And having a mother and a father that are really resilient, like the Ukrainian people, they're very resilient, like the Lebanese as well. So that helps you a lot, because that helps you is the culture of work. How do you work out of everything? And that, together with the cross-cultural in a different country, because then I went to France to get my postdoctoral degree, that also brought another dimension, right? Where you need to learn different languages so that you can actually communicate with your own culture, and then you realize we are a mixture of identities, and all of that helps you a lot when you're negotiating with other people, because most of the people, they empathize with you. If you respect your own, they respect you as well. And that's how this helped me with my development, different negotiation theories and things. But let me tell you, I remember my mom, she used to write in the newspaper in a home in the small town. And so maybe that was her influence. I'm just thinking about it. I never thought about this. And then she always encouraged me to go and get an education, not only to have a business, because they were successful business people, my parents, but I didn't go that route. I went to academia. And that was because of they want me to have what they didn't have, in the sense that getting a master's, a PhD, and so on. And I now say, well, maybe I should have done the other way, right? But that's okay. Sometimes our parents want us to have what they didn't have, right? That's always the case. And that helps you also, because you can see in their example how you're going to succeed. And to me, even to today's environment, that's applicable. So I did start with business development, book in Spanish. And the idea there was to go from A to Z in how do you prospect, how do you knock doors, how do you open doors, and then how do you close the deal. And the idea there was, it was clear in my mind, the negotiation skills, that a salesperson needs to have, because a lot of people, they sell, but they forget to close. And that's where the profit is. And the closing of the deal should come all the way to the beginning of the sale, not at the end. So it's an integral part of the whole process. That's the contribution to that business development, exactly. And so that you hinder the sale by not negotiating up front. Don't wait until the last thing. And a lot of salespeople get that mistake, that they close at the end, but that's too late. You need to plan the closing from the beginning. And so that helped me, because my mother, my father, they used to work this. I mean, I joke sometimes, I was born at the store. In the store they were dealing and willing. Like, if I didn't actually negotiate, something is wrong with this kid. Take it to the doctor, right? I mean, because it's like, what is wrong? He needs to be, dealing and willing. So I actually practice. And that brings another point. You need to bring the practice to the theory and the theory to the practice to understand how things can change based on practice. And that's about negotiation and conflict management all the time, right? I hope I answer your question.
Yes,
Yes.
beautifully.
Dr. Chamoun, question: how practical is this book for, say, the everyday person? And I'm imagining a person going to a car lot and trying to get a good deal, and then versus how flexible is this book, let's say, in applying some of the elements to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Can you speak a little bit about that, on how practical it is and how flexible it is?
Yes, that's a good question, and very complicated question, the second one. And it is practical in the sense, all of my books are practical because it comes from experience and then checking on the theory around, and that's really practical. Later on, I mean, in my life, I did wrote some scholarly papers, which are more, scientific oriented and all that, but these ones are practical in the sense that I give you a chapter with anecdotes, and then in each anecdote you walk through that, and then you might reflect on what you're doing on your next, purchasing a car, or your conflict. You might have a conflict because they deliver something that was wrong. So what do you do? Do you just don't do anything, or you complain? How do you handle that? So that's practical. Now, when you talk about Ukraine war, that's a different story, because actually, the negotiation track is one way, and they're trying to end this massacre, right? And on the other side, you need to find out what's going to happen after that. What do each one has? So it is applicable. However, I mean, it is applicable in the sense that you can understand what the drivers of the Russians, what are the drivers of Putin, what are the drivers of Ukrainians, and then you can understand what are the entrapments, how are it complicated, because you can just do it as a checklist, use the deal methodology to understand or to analyze what's going on, right? Now, if you ask me if this is negotiation gonna get us out of there, I have heard so many discussions from France, especially, where they mentioned that probably is not the time yet to negotiate, because something has to be stopped, and so that they need to negotiate, right? That's what I hear, but I'm not an expert on war. I'm more into collaborate, and now it's not collaboration, it's more like fighting together, right? So to the point that they need to get to something that people need to move out of there. And France is trying to mediate, by the way, between the two parties. That's the only country is trying to mediate. That's my understanding, right? So yes, you can actually analyze the 6 P's of negotiation. When the P of problem, which is a conflict, is there, so what do? You call a mediator, right? And then you start to mediate between the parties. That's how it could be applicable.
Dr. Chamoun, you brought up something now I thought that's very valuable for our viewers to take away, that anybody can be a negotiator. And often in mediation, people think that only lawyers can be a mediator, or they can be the only negotiators. And I think you brought a couple of very relevant pieces right now. Could you elaborate on that more? Why the different backgrounds? And you said even as a child,
Yeah,
you started very young at your mother's knee,
yeah.
learning the art of negotiation. And we all negotiate every day, everything we do. You negotiated your life with your parents,
Mhm.
if you want to be practical about it. Uh,
Yeah.
so using that application and directing it toward your book, which is absolutely a must read for anybody who wants to save money or to work their way through life, how to use your deal process. And if you could apply that, I would like that very much.
Yes. Well, actually, what you're mentioning is why, I mean, anybody can be a negotiator, right? That's what you're asking me. And
Mhm.
well, because negotiating, it takes multidisciplinary areas, right? I mean, and just on that, I actually, when I look at my background, I went to school and I get an engineering degree and a business degree at the same time in Mexico. Then I get a PhD in chemical engineering from UT Austin, Longhorns. And then I went to get a postdoc degree in France. And you might say, why are you negotiating? Well, that's what I've been doing all my life. But then I try to understand, that not only lawyers negotiate, because people understand, and that's a very good question, by the way, Dr. Manousso, because a lot of people think only lawyers negotiate or only big shots negotiate. Not really. Everybody negotiates because when there is differences between one side and the other one, you need to negotiate. Or when you need something from somebody else and he needs something or she needs something from you, you need to negotiate. So everybody could negotiate, everybody. The question is, how do you negotiate? And are you prepared to negotiate? Do you prepare well? What are the elements you need to prepare? What are the objectives of the negotiation? What are the interests? What are the positions? What are the alternatives? How do you negotiate about all of that? And what could be the worst case and the best case scenario to negotiate? Can you walk out and then you have another deal, and so on? So if you get all these elements, you prepare well. However, people, and actually, I went to Lisieux in France, where Lascaux, where they have, the Cro-Magnon, the Homme of Cro-Magnon, and that's the thousands and thousands of years ago. And I guess they negotiated. There is not a lot of written evidence, but they can just say, like just non-verbally negotiating. So even from ancient times, people been negotiating. So the idea is, if you're a problem solver, then you negotiate, because that's one of the elements, creativity as well, and so on. So because of that, that is not only given to the lawyers. I mean, typically people think about lawyers because you are contract negotiating. That's fine. Legal issues, that's okay. But business issues and conflict issues, you can have mediators, you can have anybody. I mean, you don't need to be a lawyer, definitely, because you are multidisciplinary, and in other words, if you are like the men of the ancient times, where you do a little bit of everything, you know about science, you know about mathematics, you also know law, or you can know. I mean, you are not necessarily you have to have a degree to negotiate, not even a degree. I've seen the most practical people in the streets. They're great at negotiating, and they do it naturally. So we need to just train ourselves to prepare better. And for every minute of negotiation, at least you need one of preparation, right?
And then
The
that
answers, yeah.
yes, absolutely. And then that brings me to the point where then if negotiation is such a practical thing, then why to write a book about it?
Yes, that's a good question, because you need to, even if it's practical, you need to actually, order yourself in a, methodological way. So instead of going from A to Z, maybe the process, and you probably go from A to C instead of Z. So you don't go all the way to the end. You might skip one of the steps, but at least you know the steps. And sometimes that practicality make us make a lot of mistakes. So to avoid mistakes, to be more efficient on negotiating, you need to put it down, and then go back to practice and come back. And in fact, we wrote a paper on that where we call it the street negotiation, going to the street and negotiate and then come back to the classroom, from the street to the classroom, and change the theory based on the street. You're right. I mean, and that's the idea, to practice and then go back and come back. That's a good point.
Wow.
Dr. Chamoun, some years ago, Natalia and I were actually in the Dominican Republic at a family law conference. And near towards the end of this event, all the people were out, on the town, buying things from the local market. Anyway, I recall, Natalia speaks Spanish. So, of course, she was having a conversation with a gentleman who was selling paintings on, in one of his stores in a tourist area, and she negotiated the price right in front of me. Now, I'm not a good negotiator, I don't think, when it comes to my personal life. I do this professionally as a mediator all the time, right? But I was amazed because there were, how often do you see a Spanish-speaking Pole and in the middle of the Dominican Republic negotiating with a Dominican, negotiating over a painting? And so I was a little concerned that
Embarrassed.
no, it wasn't embarrassed. It was a little more concerned that, hey, this might blow up. I don't know. Maybe the guy might get offended. Maybe Natalia might go too far. How do you? But guess what? It worked. And I'm so thankful. Got the painting, and actually, this painting ended up being a gift for me. It's actually in my dining room this day. So whenever I walk past that painting, I'm always thinking, "Wow, that was a real intercultural negotiation done right by someone who was relatively a novice." Okay,
Thank you.
Well, hey, I had no idea how it was going to work out. But
She's a mediator.
yeah, no, I'm just saying that was just you make me think of that story, because I'm sure that happens all the time. Whenever I think of intercultural anything, you always wonder, hey, could this go wrong? Because you might disrespect someone by accident in ways you don't mean. You might say something, a word that might turn off the other side. How does your book kind of attack that problem? Because that's always my concern whenever it comes to different cultures talking.
Well, that's a good point. With the same example, in Slovakia, I had a group of students, you just remind me of that. And we went to a shopping center where there were artists, with paintings. And I asked the Slovakian students, go and try to get a better price. They were completely embarrassed because it's the same culture. They could not lose face. And see, in other words, for Natalia, that was easier because she's a different culture. So when you have a different culture, you can actually, in my experience, you could actually make so many mistakes, and that's okay, because they say, oh, she's not from here, or he's not from here. But when you are from the same culture and the same town, maybe they say, what's wrong with this guy? Why is he trying to get this, right? That's one factor. So sometimes when you have a different culture, that's a blessing, because people will think, well, the other side might be thinking, okay, she wants a discount. Maybe, she doesn't really value this, but maybe she doesn't understand it. They start justifying her negotiating, right? Well, they are the same culture, and they know this is an artist, and they're trying to lower the price. That might be offensive for the other one. But the bottom line is, do not be afraid. Just ask, and don't worry about it. That's the point, because if you worry about it, then it becomes worse. So in my experience, I always ask. You lose nothing from asking, and that's what I tell my students. You need to listen to the other side, understand their concerns, and then you ask. And so in going through the process, you won't. It's okay. It's just trial and error. That's what negotiation is. But when you have the same culture, it's more difficult. So what do? I bring somebody with a different culture if I want to negotiate with my own. And so I say, you ask and I watch, right? And then and then the negotiations start. But that's perfectly okay, you know. So in other words, yes, you need to look at the process and see what the variables are. Are they the same culture, different culture? How, you know, you approach it. Typically, when you go and ask somebody that is an artist, you know, to lower the price, that's kind of offensive, right? Because they could get offended. But if they are selling somebody else's art, that's fine. You know, it doesn't mind. But if it's the artist, you know, the actual artist, that's more offensive. So this type of things you need to consider as part of the 6 Ps, you know, the person, the process, prognosis. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Yes.
no, absolutely. And Dr. Barbara Manousso, before you continue, just wanted to add, in addition to all of this, I was born in Haiti on the same island, and so I'm close enough, right, to the culture.
Yeah.
But it took a European to come in to resolve the
To
deal.
close the deal. To close the deal. Well, this has been
That's
absolutely
interesting.
wonderful, Dr. Chamoun. And
Thank
you've
you.
given wonderful information and you've empowered anybody listening that they can have uh, the initiative to be a good negotiator. And your final thing that you just said, if you don't ask, you won't know. And so we can use that next time as we do the second part of our series. Thank you so much today. That absolutely wonderful takeaways on the deal that you have written for negotiation, for mediators, and for anybody else, whether they're negotiating a $1 item or $1 million mansion. And your biggest takeaway, you had many, but the big one is if you don't ask, that's is a very crucial part of the negotiation process. Absolutely outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
All right, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.